And I still haven't set up my other audio stuff or anything, but and I probably should still adjust this stuff. I'll do that now. So to people that are just hopping in this live stream, basically what this is a haphazard Friday night for me, and what is it, Saturday morning for you?
Yeah.
So to people who don't know who Rans is, this is Rans of Ransy's show. What's the official name for the show?
Just Ramsey.
Yeah. So Ransy has a live show that's really, really great, and I'll throw a link in the description when we get going here, and you can type it into the chat here too. You can see it in the StreamYard comments area. But yeah, he does a live stream show that's really useful. So I highly recommend people check it out. Let me try to zoom in a bit here. Maybe this will kind of make things a little bit better. I have to like scoot this way if I'm going to do this. It's all goofy. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about synthesizers and synthesizer techniques and that sort of thing. I'm still setting up because, like I said, I wasn't even planning on doing this show today, but I figured why not? So you should be seeing a delay on between my voice and the audio, right? Are you noticing that my lips are out of sync with the audio?
Oh, it's very subtle though. It's not very much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wasn't too worried about it. I didn't feel like setting all that stuff up because it's really your fault for me even setting up the ATEM at this point. I was just going to use a webcam, but hey, now that I have that set up, I can.
Yeah, but that looks so much better. Look how nice that looks.
Can you hear that at all?
Yes, it's beautiful.
That's coming through.
It's a thing of beauty.
So, yeah, what we'll do is I'm still trying to organize. I have my mic not in the right position for this sort of camera angle, and it's just a hot mess. So people are starting to file into the live chat now. So definitely pop in the live stream and live chat, all that good stuff, and let us know that you're there. And I'm gonna I need to grab the YouTube link. Brock is asking about what we think about the OpSix coming out. I have a lot of opinions on the OpSix personally. I'm really excited to see Knobby FM come out, like hands-on control. However, the same feeling that I felt about the WaveState, because I was really excited about that too, is that I wish they hadn't put it in that chassis with lack of aftertouch. And I'm not a mini key hater by any means, because I play horribly. So mini keys don't bother me that much. That being said, if that key bed had aftertouch and honestly, I'm spoiled by Hydrasynth with polyphonic aftertouch. I want everything to have polyphonic aftertouch now. But FM especially. So for me, yeah, I really wish it had aftertouch expression on it. That's my biggest criticism for it. But it looks really cool for what it is. And if they do like a Minilogue XD style module for it, I'll be right away in line for that. Like, give me that all day long, you know? It looks dope. And I love the fact that it's kind of the modern FM, which is, you know, you have FM and then on top of that you have filters and all, so you can do subtractive synthesis post the FM. And yeah, so as far as that build quality, like I want a WaveState just because I like that style thing. Like it's kind of like this lo-fi rompler kind of thing where you're chaining samples and doing cool stuff. Like I love it on iOS, but man, like I was at NAMM and I picked it up and it felt like it didn't feel good in my hands. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't, it didn't make me super happy. But I mean, there's trade-off for the money, I guess. But at the same time, I'm like, I'd rather you build it into a desktop module with metal and all. Like, and again, I'll get back to like Hydrasynth where it's like an all metal desktop module that's really nice. Give me that if you're going to do it at like, what is it, $700 or so? What are the price points looking like in the in Australia?
Let me just have a look. The we can do the WaveState's the same price, isn't it, as the OpSix anyway?
See me.
So a WaveState is 1,200 Australian dollars.
Goodness.
So let me just work that out in US. It's $872 US. Now, and bearing in mind, in Australia we have a thing called GST, which is like a VAT, like in the UK, it's like a consumption tax, which is 10%. So everything is 10% dearer no matter what. Like there's a few exemptions, but most things are 10% dearer because of that tax. So where you live, like in Delaware or whatever it is, you don't have sales tax.
No sales tax. Yeah, we have none. So
you've got a nice little situation there. But yeah, so if it was like 10% cheaper, it would be, you know, around the 790 US. So I don't know if that sort of sits the same as what they charge in the US for it.
Yeah, I really should have cleaned up before I did this stream. It looked like such a mess.
The Sweetwater are charging, what are they charging? $749. So yeah, it's about the same. So when you equate sales tax and all that sort of jimbo, it comes out the same price. So yeah, 1,200 Australian dollars for a WaveState. Yeah. And I'd say the OpSix would be the same.
Oh man, that sounds hurtful to me.
Same price. OpSix.
I mean, I talk to my friends in like California and whatnot, and they all have really high sales tax, and it's just like when I hear the tax that gets topped on top of things, I'm just like, okay, now I kind of understand why some people have political beliefs that they do. I'm like, oh my goodness, but I'm fortunate over here, so I can just I can just buy stuff and not. It gets offensive when I go to like a gas station or something out of state and they charge me tax for a candy bar, and I'm like, wait. And I like, it takes me a second to remember that there's sales tax in other places. And for a second there, I feel like somebody's trying to rip me off. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. The OpSix to me, it's like, it looks really cool. I find it a little bit weird that, so it's 6 operator FM. Didn't the FM engine in the Kronos, didn't that do more though? Like, isn't that a more powerful FM engine in that one? It's not like the exact Kronos FM engine popped into this thing. I feel like the Kronos did 8 op. I'm not sure. I had to double check that.
I can check that way talking.
Yeah. And to me,
I'm like, 9 engines, did it? Doesn't it have 9?
Well, it has a whole bunch of engines, but I'm talking about just the FM engine and how many operators it has. So it's just like, I don't know, man. I kind of feel like Yamaha and Korg both have these really powerful FM engines. Why are they why are they pussyfooting around the subject when they could just drop a monster FM on us and that's hands-on control and all that good stuff, instead of like this. I don't know. At least the OpSix is doing something. You know what I mean? That other people aren't doing. At least it's doing something. You know,
it's getting there. I feel it's not quite there, but I think it's getting. It's definitely an improvement. There's no doubt.
I'll tell you one thing that
I think it needs a bit more.
I want to get your opinion on this too, because you do some programming. So when I hear people talking about, oh, it's a Raspberry Pi in there, right? In a negative light. What's your knee-jerk reaction to that kind of commentary?
I actually really like it. I mean, because I come from the computer world, right? And sorry, I'm just hitting my mic. Because I come from the computer world, I use Raspberry Pis for little projects. I love mucking around with things like Arduino's, Pis, and stuff like that. It's just something that I absolutely loved. And to see a big manufacturer go, hey, you know what? We're gonna use that because it's a great platform. It kind of just cements all the cool things that we learn, anyway. So it kind of in my world, it kind of makes it a cool thing. And also what it does is it shows you what you can actually do with a Raspberry Pi. And for me, that's killer. Like, have a look at that synth. It's got all those controls, and it's got a OLED display. I mean, I would love to be able to do that sort of cool sort of setup, and using a Pi. So for me, it's awesome, and the sound that comes out of the back of that is actually really, really nice. I mean, the WaveState and the OpSix have different sounds, but they're both very, very professional sounding bits of gear. So yeah, no, really, really impressive. I just had a look at the Kronos specs page. Doesn't actually show me how many operators the FM thing. It's called the Mod 7, right? The FM engine in it.
Yeah.
And it says it's got 52 voices. Wave shaping VPM synthesizer or VPM synthesis. So they're kind of, it's not quite a FM. It's kind of like FM and wave shaping combined. Is that kind of what they're saying?
Yeah. It's, no. It's FM and PWM combined.
Yeah. So here we go. PCM sample playback.
Yeah, PCM.
Multi-mode phase. Yeah. Combined variable phase modulation VPM from the Prophecy and Z1 sort of days. Wave shaping ring mod. Yeah. So it's kind of. Yeah, it's kind of like in a way, it's kind of a little bit like the linear synthesizer, isn't it? But adding FM to it.
Oh my god! I'm sitting here messing with my camera trying to get it to work again. It's driving me nuts.
But for all extensive purposes, those who have got a Kronos actually say it's pretty awesome. So yeah, the amount of digital emulation in that thing is pretty killer. A lot of people have done like how you did that teasy sort of video the other day where you said which analog synth is this, and ended up being a digital synth. People have done that on the Kronos, and people have gone, oh my god, that's like a Korg Poly 6. It's got to be a Poly 6, and then it's not. It's a Kronos. I love that stuff. Teasing people.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just give myself a little bit of light because I'm not going to sit here and mess with all these controls. It's just going to drive me nuts. Okay. And now I'm staring.
I think it's the only thing that kind of disappointed me was I think there's no aftertouch in both of those WaveState and OpSix synths, and I think it's something that geez, how expensive is it to implement aftertouch?
It's not. It's not.
I mean, Roland. Everyone should have learnt from the Roland System 8 debungle, really, shouldn't they? Everyone should have learnt from that because the whole synth world were throwing their synths at the screen at Roland for doing that.
Well, what's weird is we're in a time right now where there's other companies that are up and coming, and they're all trying to provide, a service to synthesizer buyers and looking at, okay, well, what do we need to bring to the table? Like you've got, there's a ton of new synthesizer companies that are reaching out to the world. We're talking Modal, we're talking ASM, we're talking Udo, like the list goes on and on and on for all these new synthesizers that are coming out, and they all are doing somewhat the similar thing. Like for the most part, they're all providing a really good build quality. They all have aftertouch, they all, at very least aftertouch, let alone going further, polyphonic aftertouch, ribbon controllers, that kind of MPE. You've got the Osmos coming, that kind of stuff. It's like the market has been screaming for more expressive control. That's why MPE even exists, let alone the fact that polyphonic aftertouch has been a thing for a really long time. Like this is not new, and yet, I wonder. Yeah, Sequential did have like back in the day, Sequential had, I think the T8 had polyphonic aftertouch. But I don't think any of the DSI synths had polyphonic aftertouch, and that's a premium brand. The Moog 1 doesn't have polyphonic aftertouch. That's a premium brand. Like I'm talking about these synths because they're extremely expensive synthesizers. You would think like the big three, Yamaha, Korg, Roland, would be in a position to where they can provide this sort of value to their customers. They've been in the game for so long, you would think, okay, they're going to provide the value that, from experience, they've been in the game so long, they know what they need to give us, right? Yet they're the ones, for the most part, giving us the lowest quality these days. In my opinion, this is my personal opinion. I mean, I have like right above the Prophet 5 here is the JDXA, and that's got to be one of the worst build quality synthesizers I've ever, had the pleasure of purchasing. Same with the fact that the System 8 I think is a fantastic synthesizer, but then they put it into something that doesn't have aftertouch. It's a kick-ass synthesizer. I mean, it really is. Like, I love, like, I've got the System 1M over here. Like, I think that engine is awesome.
It's really good.
It's like, it drives me nuts when companies like half-ass things. Like, why are you creating something and I guarantee you the engineers behind that stuff are probably pulling their hair out, because it wasn't them that had to decide this kind of stuff. It was like, a bean counter or something saying, we're not going to sell enough to justify this price point, or if you add this, the price is going to go up to X, and then we're going to sell less amount of units, whatever it is. But it really drives you nuts. And it does get back to also like why we have so many short keybed synthesizers now. Now, short keybed synthesizers don't fully bother me that much because, again, I'm not a great player, but I can fully understand people who are good players being frustrated by it.
Yeah. I think like you're touching on, whether the engineers were making that decision. I can just imagine some sort of, boardroom meeting where they've got all the finance department in, and they've got the CEO, and they've got the board, the sort of senior engineers. They're all sitting around a boardroom table, and the engineers are going, we've got the aftertouch, we've got the polyphonic aftertouch algorithms, they're all ready to go. And then someone in finance is going, yeah, but how many more hours of development, and how much more is that going to cost us? Oh, it's going to cost us another $150 manufacturing or whatever. And then someone's going to go, no, we're going to take that off because it's going to save us that sort of money. And then we're going to then launch it because people will still buy it because it's kind of not, in their opinion, maybe it's not a core thing. And I think the synth world needs to voice this more. We are craving for expressivity. So anything to do with expressivity, whether it be aftertouch, polyphonic aftertouch, ribbon controllers, better mod wheel implementation, better, like some of the synths that I've seen recently with absolutely shocking mod wheel implementations, like even just placement where they've put it somewhere where like you're playing and then you've got to move your hand like miles away from where the keyboard is. Things like that. They're just kind of starving us from expressivity. And you need to kind of think to yourself, well, if you're a synth manufacturer, how much is profit really going to give you in the short term versus loyalty, product, brand? You're going to have people absolutely loving what you do. If look at the Hydra synth, right? There's so much love behind that synth. ASM, they've got like a cult following now because of what they've done. They've got polyphonic, they've got the ribbon controller. Like, it's just really well implemented, that synth. And as a result, people feel like they can play it, they can be expressive on it, and that's where you're getting that love. So just do the things that we as synthesizer lovers tell you to do, and then you'll get cult following. You'll get people buying it.
One of the other things that we could say is the casing, right? So like plastic cases and that sort of thing. It's like, well, in a post-COVID world, maybe these other companies were ahead of the game by doing cheap cases that are all plastic because nobody's ever going to perform a live gig again.
Yeah. Where's the most common place that people drop their synths? On the corner. And if it's plastic, it's just going to go crack.
And the thing is like, I really like this stuff. Like, I actually, a lot of people were complaining about like the Minilogue when it came out because they were like, oh, the filter sounds thin, and which admittedly it does. But sometimes you want that in a synth too. Like not like it's like a Tele versus a Strat versus a Les Paul versus a SG versus a Jazzmaster. It's like you don't always want every synth to take up every bit of frequency space in a in a track. And to me, I really like the Minilogue. Like I had one for a while. The only reason why I sold it was because they were going for absurd money. Like not long after they came out, there was like a shipping issue where they couldn't get them out. And they started selling them for like, I think I sold mine for like $650 when I got it for like $4, something like that. Right. And I wasn't even trying to take advantage of somebody. I was like, I'll throw it up there, and if somebody buys it, they buy it. But I really liked it. The clicking envelope thing I thought was a joke because people, just need to know how to program their synthesizers. Like, I mean, it was a non-issue. And people made it an issue. That's kind of how I feel about the whole Raspberry Pi thing. I'm like, that's a non-issue. Like that's if this is the most powerful platform for the money, use it. I don't care what it is. Like I really don't care if it's a consumer available chipset, computer on a board, or if it's, something custom made. Like I don't care about any of that because it's all just code at the end of the day. As long as you can get low latency and a lot of control and deep synthesis out of it, I don't care what it's built on. It just needs to have dope code in it. Like if we're talking digital synths,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the Minilogue is one of my favorite synths. And I actually use the Minilogue for a lot of bass duties. And a lot of people say to me, oh my God, you're using a Minilogue for bass? Isn't that like a poly? Isn't that like a lead synth? And I'm like, guys, just yes, but why can't it be also a bass synth? Why can't you stack some oscillators and just thicken that bass up? I mean, it's insane what you can do with it. It's got so many cool little quirks about it, like with the different selections on how you actually use the oscillators, whether it be poly, mono, unison, and there's side chain, all these kind of weird things that I've never seen implemented, like from a oscillator sort of selection point of view on it. And yeah, people saying the filter is thin. I actually think that's cool. I think that the fact that it's thin means that you can take, the whole point of a filter is that it's subtractive, right? You're taking something away where you may not want it to be thick. I mean, thin and thick, let's,
And to that same point,
what's that mean?
It's funny because in a way, that same criticism, you could really level it at what a lot of people would be like, oh, that's the fattest filter. You could definitely level that same criticism at a Minimoog because it does the same thing. It removes bass when you bring up your resonance, it's not Q compensated. But I feel like I honestly feel like a lot of the Minilogue criticism came from people who were not familiar with programming synthesizers, like who really like either it was not necessarily their first synth, but maybe like they had been in the plugin world a lot, or they were used to romplers or like digital synths or whatever. It was a lot of weird criticisms that just didn't make sense to me. Like if you feel like an envelope has a click at the beginning and end, it's like that's really easy to fix. And generally speaking, that's a sign that it's a very fast envelope. Now you could talk about right? DC offset, but that's easy to overcome too with just a little bit of attack and decay. And I messed with that. Like I even timed it, and it was in the milliseconds, like the very low milliseconds, like single digits of where you could remove that. So like you could use that for sound design, especially for drum synthesis.
Amazing.
Or organ sound where you wanted key click. And then people were like, oh, I can't have that. It can't have that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, dude, half my modular synth will do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You want that because it's there. And if you then don't want it, you can easily remove it. Whereas what happens the day when you go, oh, I want to be able to be percussive. Oh, it doesn't do it because the envelopes are too slow. And then all of a sudden you're whinging now because the envelopes are too slow. So what do you want? Which one? Just have them all. Then stop complaining. Yeah, no, I remember when that
first came out. So back to the programming stuff. This is interesting. So Brock says in here, right now Korg is having issues with their apps and the new Windows 10 2004 build. Do you think that has something to do with Raspberry Pi? I can't save or upload presets right now on my WaveState because of this problem. I wonder if the OpSix will have the same issue. I don't know anything about that, but the reason I think that's interesting is because I literally had to leave some groups today on Facebook because I got sick and tired of, like, the, for lack of a better word, idiocy of people freaking out over the M1 and Big Sur update, and the fact that companies are sending out emails saying, hey, wait to update. And people are acting like this is something new. Like, no, you never update right away. The audio guys, we're always the last people to want to update because we're usually the last people fully dealt with, and we all had so many different use cases. Like the gaming guys, they tend to get stuff worked out pretty quickly. They've got a huge user base. It's out there. Yeah, there's a lot of graphics cards, but for the most part, it's like graphics cards and then you're doing your thing. You know what I mean? Maybe you've got some gaming peripherals as far as controllers and whatnot. But the audio guys are on a whole other level. We've got literally thousands of audio interfaces, controllers, software, all this other stuff. And it's like, this is not new, and it's not new to Mac. It's not new to Windows. This happens every time there's a major software update, regardless of platform. Like, get your mind right. And that stuff just drives me nuts, man. Like, how are people acting like they're brand new all of a sudden?
Oh, that's self-entitled, aren't they?
I don't know.
That's where it comes from.
Well, I think some of it is also like there's this weird bias where people just want to be like, ha ha. And it's like, well, you're saying ha ha at like your own community. Like, what sense does that make? No, dude, it's just wait because it's a brand new update. This is what happens. And yeah, Beats by Rossi says, I'm still on Mojave. I don't even know what the name, like, that's the other thing is that I'm sick of like Mac, like update names.
Yeah.
I don't even know what they are anymore. I got I have to say it quietly. I got my kid my kid. Okay, yeah. I got it for myself and my family, but I got the Xbox Series X for Christmas. And
you got it for yourself.
Let me tell you about how much I hate the naming convention because it's so difficult remembering. Okay, Xbox, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox One X, like Xbox One S, like Xbox Series S, like what? Worst naming convention of all time. I just had to get that out of my system. I'm ranting. So
yeah, absolutely. No, but like if people are going to have a crack at whinge, complain about software or implementations of whatever it is, synth into their Mac or synths into their audio interface, they really need to like have a good look at themselves first, because to sort of say, oh, these are big companies, they should be aware of everything before they release something, they should be on top of it. Well, why? Because it's something that is not in their control. They don't own Apple, they don't own Microsoft, they're not like in bed with these other companies. They're just another organization developing stuff. And there's development process, and when it's released, they might have tested it on a massive amount of different scenarios, but you're not going to be able to test it on the infinite scenarios that the world will see. And the fact that the world is coming back and going, hey, it didn't work for me, that's cool, because like be the owner of that and go, hey, I found it didn't work for me, and this is what I've experienced. Here's the screenshots. But be positive about it and go, maybe you guys could sort this out for me. This would be really, really great. Instead of being, oh, look, it doesn't work, I want my money back, and I'm going to throw my synth at the screen in disgust. That's it. I leave groups for that sort of behavior. I find that they're holier than thou, and they feel like they're self-entitled, and really at the end of the day, they just end up looking like fools, really, honestly.
Exactly. I just like, I found myself reaching my breaking point this week when just reading these forums and just like, oh my God. Like, and then like when I try to say like, hey, this happens every time, it's nothing new, people like freak out and they're like, oh, it doesn't happen on Windows. I'm like, really? A quick Google search will show you otherwise. Windows just hasn't updated in how many years? It's like, come on, man, calm down with that. I don't know. It just, and the other side of it is, with these massive updates, which I'm no fanboy of any of this stuff. You know, I'm constantly debating my buddy Steele over at MSX. Like he's building a brand new PC right now, and he's also Mac based. And I'm like, man, I know I need to do it. Like just for video, I know I need to do it. But at the same time, I'm running like all my stuff right now runs on a 2012 Retina MacBook Pro that I've had no issues with. The only issue I have with it is the fact that I'm running out of internal hard drive space. That's it. Oh, and the battery, which screw you, Apple, for the way that they paste in their batteries. That's my biggest gripe about what they're doing right now. But like, man, I don't mind the PC setup at all. It's just that some people really enjoy a certain workflow. And for me, I really like that the Apple workflow. It just clicks from my brain the way that I'm working. But man, I look at PC and I'm not like, oh, I would never go PC. I'm like, dude, I'm jealous. I wish I could just swap in a new motherboard or swap in more RAM, whatever. Like, dude, there is tons to love about that stuff. And it runs fine. It's just the fact that, you know, sometimes I'm stupid. I have a Surface Pro. I use it for testing, for beta testing gear and stuff, but I don't use it for producing on just because kind of like messes with my head. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of how I am. I mean, I've got a Mac Mini sitting over here, and it's a 2012 Mac Mini, same year as your Mac. I mean, I've actually got a Mac Pro as well, but the Mac Mini takes up literally no desk space at all.
Yeah.
And I've maxed that thing out hardware-wise. You know, I've done the iFixit where you can go in and max out the memory and put a second drive in and all that. So I've done all that. I did that years ago. And
I still have my 2008 Retina, my 2008 MacBook Pro, and it still runs perfect.
Yeah, they're still rocking. And I refuse to update this. So I'm sitting on High Sierra at the moment with this. I won't go to Mojave. I won't go to Cadillac. I won't even do it because I know the moment that I do that, that Mac is just going to go, help, I can't handle the source code.
I was very cautious going to Mojave, but I did it, and it's running fine, but I'm just out of internal hard drive space, and I can upgrade the hard drive space on it. I'm just like, do I want to spend the like $250 to do that when I know come spring I'm buying the 16-inch MacBook Pro when it comes? Like, it'll happen.
Well, I just use the external hard drives. So, you know, you're infinite there.
Yeah. I've got multiple. Yeah. Like, I've got a Thunderbolt dock, and I've run a crap ton of SSDs. So
you kind of just have to be a little bit more sort of housekeepy with it and just keep it clean. But it's a pain. I know. I feel your pain. What I was going to say is that on the flip side, I use a Windows PC for all my video stuff. Because I can, like you said before, I can put the pants graphics card in. I can soup it right up, max memory. I can muck around with this, take it apart, clean it, put it back together again, put different hard drives in. I can do all that, and every time I turn it on, she works. It's a great thing, and I don't do music producing on it at all because I'm with you. I love the workflow in the Mac. It just kind of feels like they've got the audio.
I will say the other thing that throws me for a loop, because I do videos, like I do my videos are strictly for my own pleasure and because I want to share. I'm like, holy crap, I have access to cool stuff. I want to share it with people. But I don't do it like some of my friends that have like YouTube channels and they do it kind of professionally or pseudo professionally. I don't do it like that. So, and I also don't have the knowledge or skills of editing that they have either. Like I was watching Alex Ball's video today on the ARP, which his editing is godly, like so great,
brilliant,
so great, such a fantastic channel. And I have no way in hell would I have time to do something like that, edit something down like that. That being said, I use ScreenFlow for the bulk of what I do. And it's like simpler than iMovie. It's very basic. And it's just easy for me to use. Now, if I build a PC for doing video, I guarantee you I'm going to be pulling my hair out for a good 6 months before I get half decent at it. And I'm like, do I really want to go for that? Nah, I'll just buy another Mac. And with the new Mac Minis that just dropped, like I really think that I might get a Mac Mini just for doing video, and then have my production MacBook, because the prices have dropped a little bit and it looks pretty dope. But I found a cool fact that really kind of sucks. Did you know that the M1 Max will not work with the eGPU?
Yeah, I heard that.
That's crazy. Because that was one of the coolest things about the Thunderbolt, is that you could use eGPUs. Like, I was thinking, I could get a Mac Mini, get an eGPU later, and like have it like kicking ass power. Nope.
No. Is that something like chipset? Like, is that kind of like two different companies saying, no, we don't want to play nicely with each other? Or is that something that they just have to develop on their chipset?
I think that's Apple, like, just going full hard body ARM. Like, I don't know. I have a feeling
Intel.
Their whole, and the fact that like Thunderbolt is Intel and Apple together, right?
Right.
And like, we're outside of my expertise area, but admittedly, so I'm just bullshitting on a Friday night. But I know that they co-developed that, so I don't know. I don't know if Apple gets any of the licensing or whatever. I think they dropped the licensing altogether for Thunderbolt anyway, as far as the fees, because originally there was a fee for licensing the Thunderbolt, and that was part of why it was making it so expensive to even just get a cable. I think they dropped that, but still, I don't know if like Intel gets more of that or Apple was getting more. Like, who holds more of that production? Because it kind of seemed to me like it was more Intel, but I don't know.
Intel invented it. That, as far as I read up, they invented it, and Apple kind of said, "Yeah, well, we'd like to be like exclusive with this. So how does that work?" And then Intel would have said, "Well, pay us this amount of money, and then you can be." And I think that would have had a shelf life of that sort of license. That would have been an agreement period. And once that expired, Apple probably looked at it and went, well, I don't know if we want to renew that. And that's probably when you're seeing that licensing thing drop. And things
I don't know. I think they co-developed it though, because when I say licensing, I mean like other people had to pay to implement those chips in their setup. Like,
third party.
Like, if you bought a Thunderbolt interface, they had to pay a licensing fee on that. Like the interface company had to. So I don't know for sure. And if anybody in the chat is a computer science guru, I don't know. Aside from you, Ramsey.
Well, I just don't understand why they don't just use USB-C. I mean, for me,
the new ones are using what, USB 4, which I know zero about.
Yeah, it's been around for a bit, but there's not a lot of knowledge in mainstream about it. It's so the protocol has been around for a while.
It's supposed to be faster than Thunderbolt 3 at least, I think, right?
It's faster, yeah. Everything's like they implement is technically faster, but there's always issues when they do release these things. It's a bit like you're going to have a different sort of cable format, and then you're going to have manufacturers out there having to make products that are compatible with this, and then you're going to have adapters, and there's all sorts of issues you've got when you're doing that sort of stuff. So that's why I say, like, USB-C is actually pretty solid. Even, like, I know it's been around for a while, but like, seriously, just
but C is the connector, not the standard, right? Like,
C is the connector. Yeah.
It's 2 and 3, right?
Yeah.
So
just make everything USB-C, and then everyone will have a bit more of a global sort of. I mean, that cable is actually pretty. Out of all the USB cables, the USB-C one is one of the better. Would you agree?
Oh, I thoroughly agree. Let's say a handsome goodbye to USB micro, because that was the worst. Like,
God.
Good Lord, that was bad. Micro and mini, both of those are straight trash. Yeah. No more BeatStep or BeatStep Pro connector type. Oh my God, I hate those things with a passion. That was one of the few missteps on the audio fuse, in my opinion. The regular audio fuse has one of those micro connectors on it, and I railed against that, but no such luck. That thing, and I haven't had any issues with it, but I don't trust them at all. Like, I don't trust that connector. And USB-C, I have zero issues with. I've got a bunch of devices with it, and I like it a lot. The
Hey, Mike Delix just mentioned about Firewire, right, in the chat, and
which is still available over Thunderbolt.
Well, the thing is about Firewire is I remember reading like about a month or two ago that they were looking at, or maybe they're not looking at, maybe it's actually happened, but there was rumors about a new Firewire protocol coming out. And someone in chat may know, because I actually haven't been up on this, but one of the reasons why I still use my Mac Mini 2012 is because it's got a Firewire port on it. And my mixer, which is over here, is a PreSonus Studio Live Firewire mixer. And for me, the biggest attraction with that, and I've never ever had an issue with dropouts or glitches or anything like that, has been because that frees up the USB ports for other stuff, because it's not using USB, it's using Firewire, right? And that to me is killer. So yeah, if they can, be interested to see what Firewire development comes out, because it to me was a really, really good protocol.
Yeah,
it definitely was. Audio world.
I still have a bunch of Firewire hard drives around here that I won't get rid of for I have no idea reason. Like I've already duplicated that info over to a bunch of other stuff, but I'm not getting rid of it. You know, they were rock solid, and I never had a problem with them. So I'm sure they'll die eventually. But let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the analog and digital thing, which you just did a show talking about analog and digital.
Yeah, a few weeks ago. Yeah, it was great fun. Well, you were on it, so.
Well, I'm going to pretend like I wasn't.
Okay.
Analog and digital to me is like one of those topics where it's like it can be a really stupid conversation, or it can be really interesting. It can go either way. Like if you're a fanboy, and if you're just stuck on one side or the other, and you can't see, like if you can't see the forest through the trees, then it's a really stupid conversation. But it can be really interesting when you really dive into the nuts and bolts of things. And yeah, so Benjamin, I'll switch to the Knob Creek 15. So this is
the turkey, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the Knob Creek 15 year, which is fancy.
See, for me, it's still. I just had a chai latte. It's still what is it? Morning here, 10 a.m. here. So
yeah.
Not quite ready for the hard
10
stuff
yet. On a Saturday, so it's like tomorrow is my daughter's 14th birthday. So shout out to Ellie, who is watching some other YouTuber right now, because apparently they have a YouTube channel that only lasts 1 year and it's getting deleted tonight, which is I thought was kind of an interesting way of doing things. But
that could be a bit like a musician saying, "This is going to be my last concert," and then like heaps of people rock up, and they keep doing concerts.
And Jay-Z do that twice.
Yeah,
a few.
There's a famous guy in Australia who did that called John Farnham. He's been doing last concert tours for the last 20 years.
That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it. That's how I feel like my entire life is. I'm like, this is the last day I'm living, and then I'm like, I guess I got another few days in me.
This is the last time I'm going on YouTube.
Like what? Yeah. I got bills to pay. Okay, I'll live another day.
But back to the analog stuff. I mean, I think I believe in the word empowering. So if you look at it from an empowering point of view, learn what each different genre will empower you with. So if you can be knowledgeable about what are the benefits of digital and what are the benefits of analog, and use those to empower in your music career, in your track making, then that's going to be the most important part about it, as opposed to being like a fanboy and sitting yourself in the corner and getting the boxing gloves on and ready to sort of fight. You know, that to me is just a waste of talent. You know, you got to look at it from a creative point of view and become like the master of your own studio and learn how to make those things work for you. You know, and a great example was what you did the other day, where you were making using a digital synth. And I was making it sound analog.
Yeah, so just to cover that real quick, and I'll pull up the patch too. So basically, what I did was I just got a Prophet 5, and I was extremely skeptical of it, to be honest with you. I was like, I don't know if I'm actually going to like it because it's very limited. You know, it's a Prophet 5. It's not a 2012 Poly Brood or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, doesn't have all the bells and whistles that modern analog synthesizers can do, you know? But and admittedly, I'm in this weird world with sequential / Dave Smith instruments where I really like what they do, but I'm commonly like disappointed at some level on certain things that they do. Like I'll be like, "Oh, this is a fantastic thing," and then I'll find like a shortcut is taken somewhere that just like is almost too much to bear, you know? However, I like their synthesizers so much that I'm still like, I'll put up with it, you know? I give them a pass. And their history is so awesome too, you know? So like it's not a love hate. It's more like a love, I'm going to give you a noogie nail kind of thing. The Prophet 5, when I got it, I was very skeptical. Like, okay, is it going to sound anything like a proper vintage synth? Or is it just like, hey, we're using these parts that are, you know, technically similar to what was used before. Yeah, they might be the same die or whatever, you know, for the chips, but still, they're new chips, you know. Is this going to be a proper vintage analog synth? There's digital stuff in there. Like don't get it twisted. Like I have to double check. I'm almost 100% positive though that the envelopes are digital, that the LFO, I don't know if the LFO is digital or analog in the Prophet 5. I haven't checked. But let me tell you, when I powered that bad boy on, first off, when I took it out of the box, I about shit myself with how beautiful it is. Like I never once said that it wasn't beautiful at all. I always looked at it and I was like, wow, that thing is pretty. Getting it out of the box, setting it on the stand, and looking at it, it is pretty. Where's he at?
Oh, sorry about that. He's lying on. He's lying down on his iPad and he's making funny noises.
Yeah, hey, that's fine. Ollie's actually locked out of the room right now, so I'm okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
But no, like it's gorgeous. But I was still skeptical. I was like, let me see how this thing sounds, right? So I set it up, and I literally have to say from first note, it is stunning. And I cannot emphasize enough how ready I was to be like, meh. It's not right. That. It's legit. Like you instantly are just like, oh my God, this is that sound, you know? And it's not just because it's analog. It's not just because it's this, it's that. It's because there's a certain thing that's going on as far as gain staging, as far as like how it's set up, that it just sounds, it's like all sweet spot. Like the whole synth is one big sweet spot. So then I was like, you know what? I'm finding all these sweet spots that are just gorgeous to my ears. Like I'm really just, I spent like hours just playing it, like not even really tweaking it so much, but just playing the presets. And I just found myself really enamored with the raw tone of it, that I was like, man, I need to put that into the Hydrasynth, you know? So I sat down at the Hydrasynth and I listened to one of the patches that really intrigued me, and I'll pull it up real quick. So it was I think it's 211. 211. Can you hear this? Is that coming through? All right, so it's very basic. You know what I mean? Like that's a basic ass sound, right?
The brassy sort of patch, yeah.
Yeah. It's just very basic. But if you listen to it really closely, you can hear certain things. So like you hear some beating. That beating is not oscillators beating. So I started kind of picking it apart in my head. Like what is this actual sound, right? And it's not the sound of like analog oscillators drifting and beating, which is what I think a lot of people would generally assume that is. Because it kind of sounds like it, right? But it's not. It's actually pulse width modulation happening on it. right?
Yeah, I was going to say there's an LFO on the pulse width. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I'm like, well, it's that there's two oscillators. You technically have three waveforms going on, right? You've got a sawtooth, a square, and I think another square, right? And I started thinking about it. So I basically recreated it in the Hydrasynth, which the Hydrasynth technically doesn't have the same exact architecture of how that synth is set up. Oh, it's kind of quiet, right? Can you hear this?
I don't know. Yeah, but it's quiet.
Okay, yeah, let me where am I at here? Sorry, I got to pull up my my audio interface. There it is. So, why is that so quiet? Oh, I think I had turned all this stuff down. That's why. Hold on. That's better. So now I'm going between the two. Hold on, I'll turn this one down so it's a little bit better volume match. Hold on, let's turn it down a little bit more. I'm gonna, like, I have to, because there's a delay on my camera, I'm trying to make it very deliberate. So yeah. This is Hydrasynth. And, oh, let me turn this up. There we go. So anyway, you get it. So they're very, very, very close. And basically, I had to kind of like just recreate the individual elements. So I had to use 3 oscillators instead of 2. I had to, set my pulse width a little bit different, how I set it all up. The Hydrasynth has essentially a Moog ladder filter model in it. I use that instead of any of the other models because it's a non-Q compensated model, which that particular patch on the Prophet is using a non-Q compensated 24 dB filter. So same slope and all that. And same sort of response. And I was able to get it very close. But the point of it really was not so much about the Hydrasynth, though the Hydrasynth can sound very analog and all that. It wants to be digital. Like, that's the whole point of it. But it was less about it just being Hydrasynth and, oh, Hydrasynth is so amazing. It was more about like, hey, you can do this kind of stuff on most digital synthesizers. You know what I mean? Like, we can get into the very, very nitty gritty of making one synth sound like another synth and that sort of thing. And, oh, there's a slight frequency dip here and there. But it's like, realistically, you get to a point of diminishing returns. You can make most modern digital synths, I don't care if it's modal, I don't care if it's ASM, I don't care if it's Roland, sound pretty much indistinguishable to the average listener in a blind listening test with an analog synth, a classic analog synth that sounds amazing. With that test that I did, just so you know, it was 75% of the people got it wrong as far as which one was analog, which one was digital. And that includes the ASM team. The whole ASM team got it wrong. They picked the Prophet as the ASM and vice versa. So, which
I wonder if the reason for that is because an actual Prophet oscillator does sound quite shrilly, like it's very bright sounding, and that can sometimes trick someone into thinking that's a digital oscillator because everyone has that stereotypical, definition in their head that digital was always shrilly and bright and crunchy sounding, right? And whereas the oscillators in the Prophet, actually, that's one of their characteristics.
I think the 3340 VCO, which is the same one in the Prophet, in general, it's a very nice saw wave, right?
Yeah,
it's a very nice square wave. Like, these waveforms are very proper, And I brought this up to Glenn Darcy of ASM, and in sometimes, like, I talk to him and I'm just like off the cuff, like idiotic, because I'm always excited about synthesizers at all times. So like sometimes I'll say things to him that we've already talked about 100 times, but I'll say it again just because I'm excited, right? And I was like, oh, you know what would be cool? Let's sample the waveforms of like all these vintage synths. And he's like, yeah, we did that. I'm like, oh yeah. And yeah, what we found is like they all sound the damn same. Like essentially for the most part, unless there's something really quirky, a saw wave sounds like a saw wave. You know what I mean? And then it comes down to, you can get into, again, a point of diminishing returns where we're talking about very subtle differences, and it comes into like gain staging, and it comes into saturation. For me, saturation is the key almost more than anything else. Saturation and the way that resonance and feedback react, those two things are like the biggest thing of analog for me, right? Because I honestly, my modular synth has gravitated slowly towards more and more digital oscillators. Except in the fact of like really high FM, you won't hear a difference. So like really high FM, of course you'll get aliasing, you know? But other than that, like if you're in audio range, if you're in regular audio range, you will never hear it, you know? And for me, I like the flexibility of a digital oscillator more than being restrained by an analog oscillator for the most part. You know, there's a few analog oscillators that I have that I'm like, this just sounds cool. But what I find is that when, you know, digital filters can all sound just like analog too. But where the differences lie is when you really saturate them hard, when you hit them hard, when there's internal headroom issues, that sort of thing, right? That's where it all, my wife is mean. That's where it all gets really interesting. And then the amplifier stage, right? So like before you even hit the filter, what is the amplifier doing to that oscillator? And sometimes that's where I feel like the Prophet 5 is like all sweet spot, because it's like no matter what you do with the mixer on that thing, you can never go outside of pleasant. You know, on the Hydrosynth, the Hydrosynth, they purposely allow you to go outside of pleasant to do weird, interesting things. I did a few Instagram videos where I purposely made it alias as much as possible. So I set like the FM ratios all the way up to like 64, and I was trying to make all these inharmonics fold back on themselves and then throw them through a whole bunch of delay and reverb to make it just like this weird, crazy drone. And you can do that. You can't do that with a Prophet. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like I have that JDXA, the analog oscillators in that sound more digital than just about any digital synth I have.
Yeah.
You know? So
I kind of feel though that other than the tuning drift of an analog oscillator, like a true VCO, other than that, really the difference between a digital and an analog oscillator is kind of negligible, right? So you talked about on the digital side, the aliasing at really, really high audio rates, non-audio rates even. And then on the analog side, it's that digital, the voltage heat differences in tuning drift and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, there's the two sort of fundamentals. Other than that, we are pretty much talking about the same thing. Like you said, sample all those analog oscillators, sample, and then get a digital oscillator and do the same thing. It's going to sound the same. And a great example is the Novation Peak, right? Great example of a synth.
Absolutely.
That is really, really someone who knows synthesis is going, well, hey, let's just do digital oscillators. Let's put them into FPGAs.
By the way.
Yeah, Chris, it's so sad. Brilliant guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've lost a brilliant guy.
Absolutely.
A really, really brilliant guy. And we're talking exactly what we're talking about. This is him, and he's so intelligent about this. He's saying, right, let's get an FPGA. Let's emulate, generate oscillators at an audio level, and then pump that through an analog signal path, pump it through analog filters, and you're going to have the best of both worlds.
Also, not the first time he did that.
No, not the first time. I mean, Oscar, right? Yeah. He's done it before, a long time ago. And I mean, even that Oscar synth was never really truly appreciated for what it was back in the day. It was groundbreaking, right? Groundbreaking in its day.
My first introduction to that synth was Dave Spears when he first did Imp Oscar. The first time, that was my introduction to that synth as just like a US based, newbie to synthesis at the time. I was like, what is this Imp Oscar thing? And and then they did you remember they did that full size controller for it?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, and that guy did full size controllers for a few. I think he even did one for Diva. That stuff, the stuff that where you take like a digital oscillator and you run it through analog filters, to me, that's like one of the holy grails of synth sounds for me, because don't get it twisted, I love an analog oscillator doing its analog oscillator thing. But above the JDXA, I have a SQ80, right, which is really fun because you've got 8-bit waveforms, and they're like with a very low quality DAC. At the time it wasn't so much low quality, but by our standards today, very low quality, and you hear all this noise, you hear all this just crunchy snow, and just when you pitch things down, you hear the resolution of the sample break apart.
It's beautiful.
And then it's running through the same op amps, I believe, that the Memory Moog used, and the same filters that the I believe the Prophet VS used, the analog filters for Prophet VS. So you've got all this like lo-fi breakup going through and saturating on these beautiful analog circuits. And man, it is so fun, especially when you take like you can do things like take a drum hit, like a kick, and then you can sync it to a saw wave oscillator in there, so it'll loop it really fast and turn it into an oscillator, and you get these raw, crunchy sounds out of it. I should probably turn it on so I can show people.
In the world of remaking and cloning, right? That to me would be something that someone should remake. There's a couple of reasons.
And you're not going to be able to, though. You're not fully going to be able to. Like, you'll be able to approximate certain things, but like, to me, this is like a cool classic that can't properly be recreated. That DAC is different. By the way, let the boy make noise.
No, that's my daughter.
Oh, let her make noise too.
No, she doesn't know that we're streaming, so
okay.
She might say something embarrassing to the world.
Well, I only worry about my wife, like, just calling me out like she just did about my hair. But let's see if I get sound out of this thing. Right.
If everyone's wondering what I'm doing below the camera,
it's dirty.
I know. There's my little puppy. She's just sitting there and she's biting me right now. So I think she wants to go.
So here we go. Is it a what kind of dog?
It's a Cavalier, King Charles Spaniel.
Oh, okay. Because I only saw the color, and I was like, dude, that's a really small Rottweiler.
Yeah, she's got a Roddy color, hasn't she? She's got the dark brown with the tan coloring. Looks kind of mean.
Is this really quiet? Yeah.
Hold on. It's a bit quiet. But right, while you're getting that going, can I just say why I think someone should remake this? And whether they get it right or whether they get it close, it's kind of neither here nor there. But have you ever taken that thing apart? The way they've implemented the polyphonic aftertouch on that is genius, right? With the bars.
I have taken it apart. I've completely refurbished this thing inside and out.
Yeah.
And it was not fun. Because I had to retro-bright the keys, and I had to scrape off the foam for the polyphonic aftertouch on it, which, again, polyphonic aftertouch. What the hell? They had it back then. Why did they ever drop it?
We're talking about 86? That synth came out 86, somewhere around there.
I'm sure it was before I was aware of what life was.
Yeah.
So
nearly as old as you.
Yeah. I was born in 1980. So let's go to like, let's see here. It's still really quiet. Why is it so quiet? I don't know what input I'm coming in on.
Is that maxed out on the volume on the synth though? Is the synth maxed out?
Yeah, it is. But I've been recently changing a lot of stuff around in my setup. So let me scroll over here. I can give it some gain. Maybe not that high. Hold on. So I'm using the Motu 828ES, which has been somewhat new to my setup for the past few months. And it is fantastic. I really, really, really like it. And I was just adjusting the wrong trim.
Where you go?
Not do that.
Easy.
So hold on.
So not only the polyphonic aftertouch on that is cool, but also the voice architecture. We were talking about the peak before. It's actually quite similar on the SQ80, even the ESQ1 the same. How it's got digital, kind of the digital sort of generator, but then it's got the analog signal path for the rest of it, right? So it's killer. And also, we can't forget to mention about the envelopes in this, right? The envelopes in this are crazy.
Yeah, they absolutely are. I'm going to kick this over here, and I'm going to kick this volume up a little bit, and let's see if I can hurt myself just a lot. Let's see. It's still pretty quiet though, right? Can you hear it?
We can hear it, but it's not there.
I don't know why it's so low right now. I must have changed something in my setup. I've been doing a lot of goofy crap lately, so it kind of doesn't surprise me. But I'm gonna boost this up here.
When you finish doing that, I want to show something because someone mentioned something about overdriving filters. I want to show something about that in a sec.
All right. Well, I'm gonna not mess with that right now because I don't know what the hell I did with my gain stage.
All right. So shall I show the overdriving filter thing?
Sure.
Sure. Right. Let me grab my mouse back. It's disappeared. Okay. So if I go to now, I'm not going to do audio. I'm just going to talk about it because audio doesn't seem to be working too well today. But this is a really good example of an implementation of an analog sound, and they've actually really well implemented the filter sort of technology on this. And there's two examples. There's the 521 module there, and you can see the sliders on here. If you go above halfway, so about 5, anything above 5 to 10, it's all overdrive. So that side of it, you're overdriving your filter. And that's just inherently built into it, which I absolutely love. I think if a lot of synth manufacturers did that, just inherently have their filters got the ability to overdrive them. It doesn't have to be that way with the slider. It can be another way where you might have another knob and feed back into itself or whatever. So that's the first one. And then, so what Roland did is they said, well, we like that, but at the same time, a lot of people don't like, you mentioned before, Ken, right? How a lot of people don't like it, how when you change the resonance on a filter, it drops the bass. And some people don't want the bass to drop. So what they did is they brought out another module, which is the 505 here, which replicates electronically the SH5 Roland filter from the late 70s, right? And the good thing about that one is you've got the resonance keeping the volume with the cutoff. And at the same time, it's got this bandpass filter that you can mix in with it. And oh my God, that thing is like, you know, you can get into death metal territory with this filter. It's insane, right? It's just so insane. And like I was just picking up on, I think it was one of the guys in chat mentioned about overdriving filters. It might have been Sweeter Than Anything mentioned it. But anyway, I just think it's, to me, it's got to be, we were talking about how synths have got to have expressivity, have got to have aftertouch, they've got to have polyphony. You know, I think overdriving filters has to be something that all synth manufacturers should allow by default, you know, because a lot of them, if you're not allowing it, a lot of them don't allow you to then do the mode trick, right? The mini mode trick where you can go out from your headphone and into an audio in. What if it doesn't have an audio in? What if it doesn't have what if it has some sort of canceling algorithm in its
hold on.
back?
I can get into some detail on that because I recently, like maybe less than a month ago or so, did some extensive testing on this because part of that, right? Part of that whole that feedback trick that we're talking about, right? Is in digital synths, it previously was almost impossible to do. Okay. And the reason was because of delay of processing, right? And then there was, I don't remember who it was exactly who was the first to do it. But I know Urs Heckman was one of the first. Okay. So Urs Heckman of Yuhi, right? So like Diva and all that good stuff, right? One of the first people to do it in a VST at least. I really wish I remember who it was that wrote the paper on it because I've read the white paper on it as well. But basically what we're talking about is zero feedback or zero delay feedback filters, or maybe I'm mixing the word order up, but whatever. Anyway, I took the time to do that to every single one of my synths and about 15 of my plugins, right? Any plugin that would allow me to run audio back in at low latency, I would do it. And I would also do it inside the software as well. So I would literally take audio in and back out. And then I would also route the audio of the oscillator back through just doing software, right? Because that's two separate processes right there when you're dealing with a VST. And man, did I find a lot of differences. Like a lot of them did not do it right. Like just they either are inverting waveforms, which cause a whole other set of issues and a different type of response. They don't handle it properly because there's delay and things just don't work right, don't sound good. Some of them did it in interesting ways and the frequency response sounded way crazy. And some of them were bang on, very few of them.
Yeah.
The interesting ones, most of the Minilogue VSTs and stuff don't get it right, including Moog's iOS one. And I'm trying to remember the exact ones. Like I don't want to like slander anybody with incorrect information, so I won't give out too much detail on it. And because I'm talking about it now, I'll probably do all those tests over again because I'm nerdy like that. One of the ones that surprised me that did it better than just about any of them was the Korg MS-20 app on iOS. Did it better than just about anything. And I was blown away because I had my MS-20 and I was plugging it up and I was like, holy crap, it was dead on. And that's an old code, man. Like that's going back to like Korg legacy products, you know? So the moral of that story is basically just like, don't judge every digital synth by the era that it's made and by, you know, what you're just like, actually use your ears and test these things, you know, because some of these things will really surprise you. I was using Arturia's, Space Echo plugin the other day on my Rhodes, and I have a Space Echo here. And let me tell you, if you don't use it as an echo and just use it as a tape saturation plugin, holy crap, they nailed tape saturation. Like better than a lot of tape saturation plugins do. Like better than some of the stuff that I've heard from not Waves. Who was it that I was using? The Slate one. I was blown away. I was like, holy crap, like this sounds like tape. I've got my I keep this thing by my side to goof off with. And man, like it there's, and granted, this thing is like for getting extra lo-fi, you know, but I was really, really impressed by the Arturia tape saturation. So yeah, like as far as digital and analog, to me, it's like people are very quick to like want to jump for digital for like, what's the new hotness? You know what I mean? Like what's the newest thing out? That kind of thing. And because of that, a lot of digital stuff won't hold its value. You know, it's not going to hold its value because, oh, something else came out and it does analog better because it's newer, you know? I'm like, dude, buy old digital synth. Buy old digital synth and freak out with it. Buy a Red Sound Dark Star. Crappy old digital synth. And like be happy with how crappy and crazy that tech was back then.
Yeah. Or an Alesis Micron, or, you know, something that's kind of...
Don't ever talk trash on a Micron.
No, I'm not. I'm actually talking the opposite.
That's one of my favorite synths. People hate
I love it.
Thing so bad, and I love it.
I absolutely love the Micron.
The Micron was dope.
Yeah, it was so good. But the thing is, a lot of people talk trash on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people talk trash on it, and I'm like, hey, can you talk trash on that synth? It's so quirky. It is so quirky.
I absolutely
isn't that we want?
I love that engine. I feel like it sounded really cool, and I wish the Ion had the reverb of the Micron, because
I don't know much. I don't know so much about the Ion because I don't think I've ever tried it. But
it's the same. It's the same engine.
Same engine, yeah,
but with a knobby interface, and I don't know if it had the delay, but it didn't have the reverb. Like the reverb came later, and that was for that. And the Miniac is the same thing.
Right. So, yeah. The Miniac didn't get slammed so much. People did like the Miniac, I feel. But yeah, anyway.
The Miniac had a better user interface.
You want to talk about good analog, digital sort of remaking of an analog sort of idea is the Magneto, right? From Strymon. I mean, these guys...
That thing sounds good.
These guys have got an analog technology made into a digital format down pat. Like, this thing is super good. Like, you would not even know that it's a digital. When you start actually working with this from a musical point of view, you're forgetting this thing's digital. You're forgetting that. You're just like, oh wow, this is a tape delay. I know how tape delay works. But back in the day, right, when tape delays were around, like in the 70s and that, people were going, oh my God, I wish this thing would do, and there's a massive big list, right? They would have been throwing their tape delays at the wall because they weren't able to do a whole bunch of shit. And this thing does it. And now you're getting the world going, oh no, but it's digital. It's not, you know, it doesn't sit out in the field with all the alpacas. It's not analog. And like, come on. Stop all this crap.
That's a new metaphor I have not heard. That's something that I have not had my gear do yet.
Sit out in the field with alpacas. Do you know what I mean? Like these purists that knit their own jumpers from alpaca fur.
I had the Magneto, and its size shouldn't be an issue, but kind of is, because it is big for a Eurorack. But imagine if that was in a 19-inch rack. Like, nobody would think anything else of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sounds so good.
Yeah.
They put basically that same unit into a pedal form with the Volante, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And the criticism I heard from that was that it was noisy. And at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but Eurorack as a whole tends to be noisy. So it kind of like, I don't have one in my rack anymore, and I still kind of want one. But I find myself growing towards wanting to have a separate effects rack that's just effects, and let that be its own processing rack. And the problem with that is like, I tend to be like, okay, well, I only want like XYZ effects for that effects rack. And then it grows, and then it grows, and then it grows. And now it's like, okay, well, just 9U of effects, just 12U. How many is many is acceptable?
So this is what this is. This is let's call this my glitch world, right? Glitchy, just mangle, like anything that you could possibly think of. Like, we've got the maths. That is one of the craziest envelope generators extraordinaire. Does a whole bunch more, I know. Awesome, right? Scooper is like the famous digital Roland scatter thing. Magneto we just talked about. Typhoon is clouds on steroids. It's got a whole bunch of extra juice in that. These little Dreadbox modules that are coming out. This is the Dystopia. This one is like a bit crusher, all right?
Nice.
So that's there. I've got this
Hold on.
planer too.
Before you move on from that, because I haven't seen too much of that. Yeah, can you give me a little bit more about what the Dystopia does? Which, by the way, was the name of my first sample pack. But
right. So you've got
sample rate, bit rate. What else?
So you've got a gate, a crush, a pink noise, and a blue noise.
Okay.
Now the blue noise is more like a filter, I feel, because it's kind of like a slope. And the more you adjust that, it's like a subtractive thing, right? And then you've also got a scatter input, which is kind of like a glitchy thing. So you can bring, and it's all CV controlled, right? So you can bring stuff in, audio in, and then CV control all this stuff. I could demo it, but it's not, we haven't got it connected up properly.
That's fine.
So kind of where I'm at, like even this module here, which is I mean, you'd call this an oscillator, right? This is a SID chip, an actual.
I had that one. That one. So let me ask you a quick question about yours, because mine. So I didn't have the deluxe. I got the one before that, and I put the actual SID chip from the Commodore 64 that I grew up with, and its audio capacitors into it, right?
Yeah.
But the downside to it that I found was that it was very unstable.
Oh yeah, she is. She's unstable as hell. So that's why I'm not using it as a musical device. I'm using this as it is a cool modulator.
Sound, but I was kind of sad that I didn't use it nearly as much as I feel like I should have and wanted to. But it was mainly because of just how unstable it was.
Yeah. So for me, if you want to stable it, there's the other chip that you can get, which is the emulator chip.
I had that too, and that was like that's like if you give someone who like really loves steak a vegetarian steak, and the vegetarian steak could taste great, but they'll always just be like, this is not real steak.
Yeah, I'm being fooled here. Yeah. I'm being fooled. Yeah. So anyway, so that the duty of the SID Guts Deluxe is modulating, because it's got all that CV. That actually one of the reasons why the Deluxe is a good one, because it's got the extra CV connectivity into it. And then where you see this faceplate, I've got a Pamela's New Workout coming, and so that's going to go in here. And I'm going to be, so Pamela's New Workout, for those who don't know what that is, it's kind of like a gate multiplier.
Sequencer, Euclidean,
sequencer, clock, Euclidean. Yeah, it's crazy cool. And so I'm going to use that to sort of muck around with, things like a lot of these modules have clock, inputs. So for example, the Magneto has a clock input, the Typhoon has a clock input, and they're beat based, right? So when you want to start, getting some interesting results out of your sounds, anything that has some sort of mangling of a beat is a cool thing, right? So I've got a divider module here from Dopefer, and then I'll have the Pamela's Workout come in there as well. And then on top of that, I've put this planar 2 in, right? Now, the reason why I like the planar 2 is because it becomes kind of this unpredictable CV control that you can record the movement of that joystick, right? So then we can patch things into various modules, and then your sort of master control of what's happening in those modules can be on the planar 2. And then you can record that, and you can record that as a loop.
It's like a super badass macro.
Yeah. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And I picked that up like a used thing. So that was kind of cool. So when we're talking about like an effects rack, I don't use the term effects in the traditional sense, like reverb and flanger and phaser and all that sort of stuff. I'm kind of using it in the terms of how can we mangle up a boring sounding Roland synth or a boring sounding, Curtis or whatever, right? So how do we mangle that? How do we we're sound designers, so how do we make new sounds? And this is kind of my little theory, and it'll probably be a train wreck, but like everything can
Fair enough. It's the weekend.
Yeah.
I think for me, as far as like how my modular setup is nowadays, it's gotten to the point where I kind of have what I really set out to do. Like I set out in 2012 to build a modular, right? And back then there wasn't a lot of the analog synthesizers that there are now that are affordable, right? So like you had, I think maybe the Mini Brute, and maybe I think the MS-20 Mini was like just coming out, that kind of thing. So like it was like just starting to happen.
Yeah.
And again, shout out to cats like Arturia and Glenn Darcy and them for having the foresight to bring it back to that, because really it was them, it was Korg doing the Monotron, that kind of thing, that really reinvigorated the whole surge into analog again. But at the time I really wanted a SEM, like really bad.
Yeah.
And there was nothing, you know? And I was like, man, I really wanted a SEM, and there was no possible way of me getting one. And it just, I had never even played one. I had heard them, but I was like, man, like it looks like some lab equipment, and I love me some lab equipment. Like I just love the nerdiness of it all. And that and a Mini Moog, I was like, man, I want a Mini Moog. I had touched one a few times, but like there was no way I was ever going to afford one. How can I get that? And it was modular. But the problem was that, you know, of course, there was no information on how to get into modular back then and that sort of thing. So I found my way. But now I feel like I'm to the point where my modular is exactly what I could want it to be. I have a drum machine that's in modular. I have multiple monosynths that are in modular. I can recreate most classic synthesizers with my modular, and I have really interesting new things like the Morphogene, the ER301, Wave Razor, like lots of like really weird digital modules and analog modules and all that stuff. And now it comes down to, okay, well, you have all that stuff. You should probably not just make farts with it, you know? And that's where things like we're really fortunate that, so like Eurorack sequencers have evolved a lot in that time. Audio Damage made an amazing Eurorack sequencer. Zeta Ohm made an amazing Eurorack sequencer. Now you've got newer ones from like WMD and cats like that. And then you have big companies like Arturia is making them. You've got Akai who's building them into the MPC and the Force. You can now use gear that previously was like designed for you to grow your hair out and put it into a ponytail and never see the light of day again, can be used for music that people will actually listen to. And with that comes expansion of what their devices do. So like we talk about like the effects in the term that you're talking about, like weird modulation routines and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, now that, dude, if the Force can send and receive, you know, CV, guess what? Now I want to send modulation to my start and end points and my loop points in samples. Now I want to I want to have my modular controlling my MPC and telling it when to skip a beat, when to juggle up a routine, whatever, you know what I mean? And you're getting more and more people that are thinking outside of the box. It's crazy because like you can look back to like Aphex Twin, Square Pusher, this sort of music, you know, from the 90s, and people were like, it was blowing their mind how they were doing glitch edits and that sort of stuff. And then plugins started happening that could create these glitch edits and make them easy for people, and people were using them. I feel like the same thing is happening with Eurorack sequencing and modulation. I feel like it's a very short amount of time before we're going to see all this same sort of stuff happening to regular, quote unquote, regular sequencers. And you're going to see MPCs, regular DAWs are going to be having this. Ableton just got all sorts of randomization in it, you know? Like it's really interesting that all these experimental, ultra nerdy aspects are now becoming mainstream.
Yeah. Another sequencer that you could probably add to that list is the Winter Modular Eloquencer. That's super dope, right? So shout out to those guys. I would love to. I can't afford one right now, but I would love to have one of those sitting in my in my gear. But probably one of the reasons, Ken, why I haven't got a lot of Eurorack sequencer gear is because I have the MPC and the Force, right? And all you have to do is have a really, really good Eurorack Midi to CV module. Now, I think this is something that I'm kind of getting a bit vocal about, right? So a lot of the gear that you buy these days, they've got CV on them, okay? So people are sort of falling back on the, oh, I don't need it because my Keystep or my Behringer MS1 or whatever it is, right, has got CV on it. So therefore I can do MIDI to CV. But in reality, MIDI to CV is kind of a really sensitive topic because a lot of it isn't right. Even the basics, like getting your octave voltages correct, when you're pitching up and down. And in Eurorack, tuning can be a big, big drama, right? Unless you've got it sorted, okay? So if you're pulling your hair out, tuning your oscillators each time, it could actually just be your MIDI to CV doing that to you.
Well,
it
on
might
top
not
of that,
actually be.
One of the weird things that I thought that we would see move to more commonplace, and I think I know why it hasn't, is so Expert Sleepers had a really great device where they would you can basically send the oscillator audio into the module and it will look at what the oscillator tuning is, and then it will scale the CV to it. So it'll translate the CV that it needs to be to your analog oscillators, and it'll make everything just in tune for you, right? And I kind of expected a lot of these larger companies to do that, to latch onto that, because it's not an overly complicated process. It's complicated if you're trying to do it in something analog, but if you're a good coder, like, they can do that kind of stuff. But what I think I found is that it seems like a lot of these companies, and people do tend to not understand that even the large audio companies technically aren't that large and don't have that big of a budget to begin with. But a lot of them don't have a lot of experienced Eurorack users. They don't have a lot of experienced people who can tell them the maybe not just experienced Eurorack users, but people who not only are experienced but also can recognize those problems and articulate them to them, So I hope that in the future we see things like, there's no reason why the Force couldn't take audio input and then translate that CV out and tune your oscillators for you. There's no reason why that couldn't happen. Now, the problem with that is, of course, you're talking about a very niche user base, and is it worth the R&D to them to do this? Because it costs money to develop this sort of thing. Time is money,
I think those companies know, though. They know that particular corner of the world is expanding. They've got their marketing research guys up there.
It's expanding, but honestly, Eurorack is still a very small market. Like, it surprises me every time I see like certain companies come out with a module or something. Like when Waldorf came out with modules, I was really surprised, because the truth is like, it's still not a big market. Like, when I hear when I consult with other companies, and my thing just died. Hold on, let me switch over. When I hear other companies push back against modular, like, I understand, I get it. Like, it doesn't surprise me, that that they're like, it's not that big of a market, because they're right. But CV outside of Eurorack is getting bigger and bigger. And that's where it's like, you need to learn Eurorack now, because guess what? In 5 more years, any desktop device that comes out is probably going to have CV in addition to MIDI. You're going to have MPE, possibly MIDI 2.0, and CV.
Yeah.
Yep. And to whoever it was in the chat, here's my Monotron. It's got CV. I had to modify my Monotron to have CV back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, that's quite a common mod though, apparently. So
yeah, somewhat. Yeah. It's not that hard to do. Like if I open it up, you can see how you do it. It's not that bad.
It's on the circuit board, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the circuit board. It's really not that hard to do. I made it ugly because I'm super lazy and I don't really care about looks. But yeah, I did that back before. I think back before I went Eurorack, maybe, and back before analog synthesizers were common. I mean, the fact of the matter is like the Monotron was one of the first ones to be easily accessible for me to get that MS-20 filter.
Yeah,
or MS-10 filter, whatever it is that's in there.
Yeah. So going back to what I was saying before about MIDI to CV, and it doesn't have to be Eurorack, right? It can be just MIDI to CV in general. So like I was kind of still searching for something that I could trust, because I couldn't trust some of the other gear that we talked about before. I just didn't feel that it was doing the MIDI to CV in a trustworthy way. So I went out and I got the Expert Sleepers FH2 module, right?
Yep.
And ever since I've got that, the MIDI to CV problem has gone away with me. So now I've got myself into a situation where I'm not having, like, when you're trying to do stuff and you're setting up, and then you're finding yourself like lumbered with technical issues. You're not able to get creative because you're still having to sort out tuning, you're still having to sort out connectivity issues. So maybe your computer's playing up, whatever. But to me, it's like anything that you can do to remove any setup delay so that you're getting back to that creative process is a big thing. So like I think there should be a standard with MIDI to CV, and I think there should be obviously there's a couple of caveats on that standard. Obviously you've got volts per octave and hertz per volt and things like that, right? But there's got to be a standard. And I think when I'm talking about a standard, I'm thinking about the way it's processed, because MIDI's digital, so you've got to process it in a standard way. And I think, and obviously CV is analog or electrical, right? So for me, that was a big thing. And then once I've got that sorted, I then was able, so I was getting back to the sequencer argument we talked about before, right? This is how I got there. So then I'm able to actually rely on my MIDI sequence gear. So my MPC, which I love, right? I love the workflow on that. It's just how my brain works. It works MPC land. It has been for years. I had a MPC 1000 before. So I really wanted to get my MPC into my Eurorack. And how was I going to do that in a way that, because MPC can be multi-tracked, it can be polyphonic, it can be all these kind of things that Eurorack in a standard CV to MIDI sort of situation isn't. So I needed something to be able to take on those duties, which the Expert Sleepers, a few others can do it as well, does well. And then, you've got the best of both worlds. And obviously you've got the Force and the other MPC models with the CV output on them. Now, even with those, I still find the CV on the octave scalings out. I still find them out. Whereas on my FH2, it's nice and tight. So you've got to look at that. There's no way to know that unless you read forums and talk to people and get sort of into the technical jargon. And kind of this is why a lot of people shy away from Eurorack, because they're kind of like, it's too much. It's too geeky, too nerdy for me. So
certain things were difficult to calibrate. Like I've got and this isn't technically difficult to calibrate, but just as a for instance, I have a hex inverter MIDI to CV module. I forget what it's called, but it's basically it allows you to do 4-voice polyphony, right? And one of the notes I always have trouble with. Like I always have to recalibrate it. It's probably like just a bad trimmer or something. But the point being is it's not digital in that way to where it just does it on its own. So like there's all these little hiccups and sort of things that kind of cause quirks and headaches with it. But with it becoming more ubiquitous, as Sweeter Than Anything points out, talking about, you know, these companies handling MIDI to CV and CV audio rates at or CV at audio rate, you know, you start seeing things become easier, you know. Now there's all sorts of software suites that can easily translate. I use the ES8 from Expert Sleepers, right?
Yes, it's here as well.
Yeah, and you can use that for audio, or you can use that to basically convert MIDI into CV and do it at a high resolution. It's fantastic. You know, you use that with something like Blocks or Bitwig or whatever else, and it's absolutely fantastic. You can do some really cool stuff with it. And now I think we're at a point where more and more companies are starting to realize that resolution matters. It was really a shame when so like I really like the modal synthesizers, but they had the 002 and the 008. These are like expensive flagship synthesizers that were built, you know, supposedly kind of like to have no corner cutting, you know?
Yeah.
And then it was really disappointing to find out that when you sent CV into them, they stepped, you know? And they stepped because it wasn't really thought of at the time that, oh, you know, this incoming CV needs to be audio rate, not, you know, not a low resolution. So if you try to step the filters via, if you try to, you know, modulate the filters by a slow LFO, you would hear this stepping, you know? And it's the same with certain synthesizers. I'm not going to name names because, again, people think that I'm a hater, and I'm not. But certain synthesizers would do the same with hands-on control, and they would do it for different reasons, or they would do it just because they're sticking to a MIDI protocol. But it's like more and more, it gets back to us synthesizer users. We want to be every bit as expressive as a guitar player, you know? We don't want there to be like a guitar. Imagine if somebody released a guitar where when you did a pitch bend, you heard it go step, 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 step. You know what I mean? Like no one would buy that guitar.
Like the GR5
Gibson with its auto tuning guitars. Like nobody wants to buy that. Like we want smooth, we want expressivity, and we don't want things in the way of that. And it blows my mind that in this day and age, we still have companies that kind of don't quite like they don't put a value on it. Put it that way, because it's not. I really don't think it's a matter of people not knowing. I think it's a matter of value versus like cost versus benefit.
Yeah,
you know?
And if they know, I think if these companies know that they're going to be releasing junk like that, they should just not do it. Just don't do it. I mean, like remove that feature if it's just going to be crap. Just don't do it, and then take the flack that someone's going to, you know, like flame you down for just having crap.
And that's the thing though, is like it's weird because I try to look at it from both angles. I really do. I try to look at it from like okay, does it make sense to really go that extra effort? Or is it like, you know, is it acceptable to cut this corner? Put it that way. And in some cases it is, but in some cases it really isn't. Like CV input resolution shouldn't be, because that's also kind of the same as foot control resolution. And if I'm doing a wah with a filter on a synth from a foot controller, that shouldn't be stepping either. You know? But listen, I'm gonna let you run, and I want to say because this was a random stream. I should remind everyone. This is a very he says rate and resolution are exactly the same, but we get the gist. Yeah, no. Resolution dictates rate. I'll say that much. So if your resolution is too low and your rate is too high, you have problems. So yeah, there's that. And if your resolution is really low, then you get what we're saying. But so this was a really random ass Saturday night rant or Friday night rant for me. But Ramsey was kind enough to come on and yak it up with me for absolutely no reason. So I really appreciate it.
No worries, mate. No problems.
This was my venting for the night.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the analog v digital argument. It's still there. It has like that. That is where the argument really is truly still quite live, isn't it? That resolution is the stepping, aliasing. That's where the argument's still there. But we have to agree, though, that there are technologies out there where it's negligible, and if manufacturers implement those technologies with decent processors with higher resolution, like what Roland have done with ACB, things like that. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue in this day and age, and I guess that's what we're saying is manufacturers shouldn't skimp on digital resolution processing. They should always. I mean, we're not talking about megabucks here, are we? We're not talking about like what does it cost for a.
We're probably talking about the difference of like maybe
$10,
less than that per DAC, because you're buying a DAC that's like a DAC that's maybe $5 versus $7 or something. I don't know, but which of course you want to multiply that by 5 times to the user, but still, when you're doing a flagship, especially like I and really even for non-flagships, I expect like if CV input is there, it should work like CV. It shouldn't work like MIDI. You know, like that's the whole point.
Maybe another topic for another week that we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is
Listen,
MIDI,
I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you coming on, and I want you to have good fun with the doggy.
I gotta go.
So
awesome, guys.
Yep. Peace.
Catch us guys later.